Good morning, afternoon, or night. Hope everything is going alright. Guys King here with another episode of Draw and Jaw, the show where I talk about whatever the hell Michigan I want to talk about. Today I'll be drawing Tujba, one of my witch characters. Oh, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, share this video, and if you're feeling generous, please drop a little something in the Ko-fi. All the links will be below. For this episode, we're going to be talking about Halloween, that beautiful time of year where the landscapes are awash in bold oranges, glorious golds, and radiant reds. The awesome time of year where the perky people join we perpetually dark and brooding individuals in the sweet embrace of the macabre. October is actually my absolute favorite month. Why? Well, I'm sort of a fall guy. And I don't mean sitting in my comfy chair with my legs tucked up to my chest, wearing a cozy chic cardigan droning on and on to my disinterested beta of a boyfriend about my basic bitch obsession with Starbucks pumpkin spice. No, I'm joking. If you like Starbucks enough to waste your gas idling in the drive-thru for an $80 cup of steaming horse shit, then I can't judge you. I'm joking. Wait, what was I talking about? Oh, fall. More specifically, spooky season. That oh-so-special time of year leading up to All Hallows Eve. It's the absolute perfect time for those of us who are, to quote Lydia Dietz, strange and unusual. Those of us who are fascinated by the gruesome and the gory, the ghastly and the grim, those unnameable horrors that skulk about the night when man's atavistic terror has driven him indoors to cower away from the unknown things that shun the light of day. For me personally, horror has always been a huge part of my life. Hell, my master project at the moment is a dark fantasy, but 9 times out of 10, anything I write for it will have a horror twist. The darker things are just so fascinating to explore. Even from a young age, I absorbed true crime documentaries and horror movies as much as I possibly could. When I sleep, I rarely ever dream of mundane things. I more than likely will have nightmares, which I absolutely love. There's always some sort of element I can work into a scenario or plot point for a project. The girlfriend's dreams are painfully ordinary. It always vexes me when she recounts them. I dreamed that we broke up. I dreamed that my hair was a different color. This girl dreamed that I stopped applying for jobs. Yeah, I don't think she has anything to worry about there. I'm kind of attached to food and shelter, but you know. Actually, when I was a kid, I dreamed that one of my maternal uncle's severed head was floating at the threshold of a doorway with his eyes closed, mouthing something inaudibly to me. And to make that even creepier, that uncle and a cousin actually drowned on a fishing trip shortly after. The other cousin, who was with him, said that all he could see above the water was his head. Interpret what you will from that, but I never shared that little nugget with other family members. But even that intensity is kind of rare for me. It's usually of a vastly less personal nature and far more tasteful to creatively draw inspiration from. But still, nothing as unremarkable as being sat down to tea with Mum. I'm gonna make fun of her after I'm done recording this. I'm just the worst. I give her grief, but I do have my limits. I have absolutely no problem watching horror movies before bed or even to lull myself to sleep. But no thank you to sleep paralysis. Those of you who have experienced it are already wide-eyed and nodding in agreement. That's a whole other layer of horrible, especially if you're a creative. And now, for those of you who may not be in the know and are asking, "Good God, guys, what is this sleep paralysis brouhaha you speak of?" Because in my mind, you're all 19th century English gentlemen right now. Sleep paralysis is that very special time in a mind and body's life together where the brain wakes up first and finds that the body isn't quite ready to roll out of the bed yet. Follow along with me on this journey, ladies and gentlemen. Now, instead of waiting for the body to wake up, the mind panics like it's done all the LSD and bath salts. The mind perceives, but since the body is essentially still asleep, the physical stimulus it gets during its waking hours feels almost entirely absent. And oh boy, does it get interesting. See, existing in this weird little limbo between being asleep and awake, the lack of sensory input makes the mind, well, fill in the gaps, so to speak. And those gaps are never filled with frolicking Easter bunnies who want to give you hugs and candy. The mind always screams, "You're going to die, you're going to die. There is something in this room that wants nothing more for you to be as dead as it can kill you dead." Now, it gets a little different for everyone. A friend of mine actually gets trapped in his own mind and thinks he's yelling for his wife to help him, but in actuality, he's just quietly squeaking, and he's stuck there. Me? My paralysis is a little different. I see things that are not fun to see, things that are burned into my mind until I die. See, when I half click on, in the stillness of the night, I lay there paralyzed. Of course, I'm actually breathing, but my mind can't detect that I'm breathing. So, imagine yourself awakening in the dark, you can't breathe, and the entire room is thick with the most oppressive miasma of malice that you've ever felt. Like there's no doubt in your confused little mind that something very real is about to murder you where you lie. You can't move, you can't breathe, and you can't call out for help. You are literally trapped in your own hell. Hell, the first time it even happened to me as a kid, I was at a sleepover with my best friend from grade school. I thought his house was legitimately haunted. Sometimes it's just the paralysis and the lack of breath, and sometimes it's much more disturbing. I've awoken to my sleep paralysis demon actually strangling me. But one of the worst episodes took place in 2014 when I started dating my current significant other. I'm laying in her bed one night at her old apartment, and she's sleeping soundly next to me when suddenly the old switch clicks on and shorts out. Same old song and dance. Can't move, can't breathe. I'm in immediate danger. Now, by this point in my life, I've been getting wise to the game. When I'd find myself experiencing this little heart attack waiting to happen, I'd recognize it and talk myself down, usually by reminding myself that what I'm feeling isn't real, and I'm focusing on regaining control of my limbs long enough to ride out without excessive stress. But no, not this time. My sleep paralysis demon flipped his Sifu beard and said, "Your kung fu is strong. You are ready for the next level." See, instead of the porcelain pallor of my girlfriend's peacefully placid face, my mind perceives something other than the leggy little Kaylin of Irish descent. What came sizzling out of the old brain pan almost defies description. There, about an inch from my nose, was the most vivid vision the demon ever produced. In the place of my incredibly innocent girlfriend is a burlap sack the size of a basketball. A dirty, burlap sack with something writhing wildly inside of it. Writhing in a way that made it clear that it wasn't a solid object. The best way I could describe the movement is if you pissed off a bunch of snakes and threw them all in a sack. I definitely didn't hear anything, but as far as my ears were concerned, there was a wet slapping and a wheezing coming from inside of it. And the worst part of this whole minute that is scarred into the back of my eyelids for life is the hole in the sack. there was a single hole torn into it where a single bloodshot eye just glared at me with absolute contempt. I mean, the eye looked attached to a face, but there was no way there was a solid human head in that bag. So, imagine being face to face with this monstrosity. You can't move, you can't breathe, and because of the baby blue of the irises, you're anxious that something happened to the skirt you're responsible for protecting. I can't even tell you what happened when I snapped out of it. That episode is taped over everything else on the VHS. Needless to say, I try to avoid sleeping on my back because that's what triggers it, apparently. Hell, I think my body is even adapted to this point. If I doze off on my back when I'm winding down for the night, I'll keep waking up until I roll over. Why don't you guys share some of your crazy paralysis demon shenanigans down in the comments? It's scary as hell, but it's always interesting to hear how it affects others. The human mind really is a delicate little thing. Oh, and I wasn't kidding about the girlfriend having a porcelain complexion. That white girl is a white girl. I call her the ghost that haunts my house. Vitamin D deficiency and all. She makes me sick. How are you gonna have Irish blood in your veins and not be a redhead? I swear she doesn't have natural red hair just to spite me. But whatever. I'll give her grief about that later. This video is about the love of Halloween. For the love of all that sweet, sweet candy you put in your sack when you're trick-or-treating as a kid, to all that sweet, sweet candy you try to get into the sack when you're an adult. You can't deny that Halloween is fun for kids of all ages. Going all out on a costume is part of that fun. Some of my favorite costumes of the past include Lupin III, Jason Voorhees, and Lotney Sloth Fratelli of the Goonies. But I have to say that one of my favorite costumes was the simplest. See, back at my old company when I was on the marketing team, before I just couldn't stand the henhouse nonsense anymore, we decided on a little costume thing. All the skirts dressed up like old men, and all the guys dressed up as grandmas. The marketing director nailed it. A gray mustache, scally cap, and suspenders. Really committed to the look. Now, there were only 3 of us guys, and we did okay. One of the other guys was a dead ringer for Robin Williams as Mrs. Doubtfire. He had the look down. Now, me, I took it in a different direction. See, instead of playing it like an aged lady with the quiet dignity and time-tempered wisdom of an era past, I was catwalking around the entire building, working it like a saucy, neck-rolling parody of femininity, who was a total whore for attention. I was working it, girlfriend. I leaned all the way in. Honey child, I put on that muumuu and long black wig and put on a show. I'd put up some pictures of me doing my Farrah Fawcett pose on the floor of the marketing suite, or the one applying lipstick, but they were on my work machine and they've probably been scrubbed by now since I don't work there anymore. But most everyone got a laugh out of my exaggerated nonsense until I went across the street to my regular lunch place. See, I'm walking over there giggling to myself about how I'm going to make the restaurant staff laugh like everyone else at work. I was pretty familiar with these guys and talked to them almost on a daily basis. I mean, every once in a while, they would give me free stuff for being such a loyal customer. Hell, once they brought me some deer meat one of them had after a hunt, because I mentioned I'm crazy about venison. I actually bought one of them a shirt because I have that same shirt, and he mentioned he liked it, and so I gave him one. They know me. So I go up to the counter, working it like I'd been doing the entire day, swaying my hips, twirling my fingers in my hair, and being bubbly. Expecting a laugh out of the girl behind the counter, who I saw often. But she takes one look at this 6'1" slab of chocolate with big fake breasts, wearing lipstick and a muumuu, and a long black wig, who just approached her, and I can tell from the expression on her face that her gears immediately start turning. She doesn't spout her usual, "Hey guys, what do you have today?" Instead, she offers up a very unfamiliar and very cautious, "Hi darling, what can I get you?" It immediately occurred to me that she didn't recognize me. This amused me at first, but I decided to throw her a bone and just use my regular speech patterns to to throw her a bone, a big hint. And I think this confused her even more. Her body language became even more reserved. Then epiphany struck. I understood what was happening. I was making her uncomfortable. I was having a laugh, but from her perspective, she didn't want to offend me and get their small business canceled. She must have thought, despite it being Halloween, she didn't want to risk pissing off someone who was living their truth. I mean, I could feel the unease in her. It was awful. I felt so guilty. Not because I was in drag, but because I made her feel that way. And because we live in an overly sensitive world that will burn you at the stake for having a little fun. Or not immediately knowing how to navigate incredibly niche pockets of social circles. The rules of which are in such a constant state of flux that even those fully engrossed in them have trouble keeping track of the etiquette. But yeah, I walked in there hoping for a laugh, but I walked out feeling like an asshole. Food was still pretty good though. And can we just all go back to the 80s and the 90s where we had an actual culture and only the fundies and the parental groups woke up miserable every day, while the rest of us were having a good time? Ugh. I'll stop being an old man now and do Halloween recommendations. We'll do movies, anime, YouTube channels, and literature. As for movies, I'm going to forego some of the more obvious films like the original Halloween, Friday the 13th, or Evil Dead 1 and 2, and give you some more obscure titles. For an absolute gross out, offensive for the sake of offensive, never get made today film, 1987's Street Trash is the best trauma movie that Trauma never made. For an actual trauma film, 2010's Blood Junkie is a fantastic horror comedy that's one of the most sincere love letters to 80s slasher cinema I've seen to date. It may drag a bit if you're not in on the joke, but the characters are delightfully obnoxious, and I say that in the best way. And if you like body horror, 1989's criminally underrated Society. Think John Carpenter's They Live if David Cronenberg and John Hughes had time in the writer's room and co-directed it. And for a well-told and beautifully acted story with a chilling, uncomfortable atmosphere, give 2003's Wishing Stairs a viewing. It's the third, and in my opinion, best entry into the South Korean Whispering Corridors series of horror films set in schools. This one is good to watch with a lady friend. And if you just want booby, stabby, and aren't too concerned about the plot making too much sense, go with anything between 1970 and 1990 by any Italian giallo director. It's a whole rabbit hole of rip-offs, legal shenanigans, and drama. Some of these films have upwards of 10 different titles. The trivia in that alone is a lot of fun. Okay, horror anime suggestions. First up is 1999's Better Man. It's not perfect. It suffers from the occasional overly long expository scene, a few jarring tonal shifts from sudden slapsticky comedy, and a somewhat unclear conclusion, but among its fantastic horror themes, it manages to merge the genres of giant robo and a tiny bit of Super Sentai to create something very special. Next up is 1990's The Curse of Kazuo Umezu, a short horror anthology based on the works of the titular mangaka. This guy in Junji Ito can put some absolute hell on a page, and Umezu's style translates well to the screen in this one. And finally, 1999's Pet Shop of Horrors, which is also based on a manga. It's another anthology series that uses some familiar tropes, such as a mysterious and eccentric merchant giving items that inevitably bring horror to his customers. But this anime is an example of why this premise holds fast when done correctly. YouTube channels. YouTube channels I frequently listen to when working. The Dark Somnium, Mr. Creepypasta, all one word, and Creeps McPasta, also all one word. Three of my favorite horror story narrators. Actually, go check them out. They do really fantastic work. And last but not least, the authors of evil themselves, the masters of the macabre, and my personal literary unholy quartet. Edgar Allan Poe, Clive Barker, Stephen King, and Howard Phillips Lovecraft. These authors, these wordsmiths, these masters of their craft have always inspired me. Poe can be a bit wordy, but for those who don't mind a little extra build-up, it's well worth the wait. Plus those absolutely insane scenarios, like walling someone up alive or murdering someone with a weird eye and putting them under the floor. I absolutely love Barker's work because of his massive creativity. That, and he's not afraid to explore the baser aspects of human nature. Unlike the other authors on this list, Barker will delve deep into the dirt. Books of Blood is a great series, and I love that he got to adapt some of his stories into some of my favorite horror movies. And in my opinion, King's strongest attribute is his character work. Some of his premises are absolutely absurd, but he finds a way to make it work with strong characters and the way he'll form a story. Hell, the actual novel, has the ageless cosmic horror projecting the forms of old Universal movie monsters. And he somehow made that creepy. And I find some of his opinions on Robert E. Howard a bit unkind, but I rather separate the art from the artist. And speaking of separating the art from the artist, I already know that some of you were thinking what some of you were thinking when I mentioned H.P. Lovecraft. But guys, he was a xenophobic racist. Okay, what's that have to do with his contribution to literature? What's that have to do with the absolute mastery of the English language he commanded? What's that got to do with him inspiring millions? Look, I've read The Rats in the Wall, I know the cat's name. I've read Horror at Red Hook. It doesn't change the quality of the stories. Why? Because I'm not going to sit here acting like a dead man born in a different era retroactively owes me a more overtly vaginal contemporary set of sensibilities. The man's work was phenomenal. End of. I don't need a set of morals or socio-political perspectives from him. That's what the hell parents and community are for. What he produced out of who he was is what matters to me. Not everyone you admire has to be your hero for every aspect of their lives. I don't respect the hell out of Mary Shelley because she was a female writer. I respect the hell out of Mary Shelley because she wrote a timeless horror classic that we all still talk about to this day when she was 19 years old. I don't give a damn if she bled for 5 days out of the month. Her accomplishment is what I'm interested in. But I'll leave that there before this gets too antagonistic and leave you with a few tomes to keep you up at night. Poe's Complete Tales and Poems, Barker's Books of Blood, of course, King's Night Shift. I also recommend On Writing, King's Memoir, and Lovecraft's Necronomicon collection. Oh, PSA, don't read Owen King's Sleeping Beauties. I read it from cover to cover and it was a chore. Feminist trash. I was pissed that I wasted my time on it, but elated I was finally done with that nonsense. Characters sucked, premise was wasted, and the motivation was clearly an exploration of a clumsy socio-political perspective rather than telling a horror story. But anyway, what are some of your favorite entries into horror media? You might turn me on to something new. Also, what are your favorite treats? What is your costume for this year? Let me know in the comments. Hope you guys have a happy and safe Halloween. Remember to check your candy, mind your drinks, and be careful of drivers on the road. And don't forget to comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and most important of all, draw my spooky OC. Until the next one, you guys.